You want to say hi? We're about to go live.
Not yet. I'll wait for your cue.
Okay.
And I'll jump right in.
Sure.
Now?
Yep. You're ready to go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Viktor Koen. I'm an artist, an educator, and sometimes people will trust my ideas to take them, run along and collaborate in something bigger than myself. Now, when Anel asked me to do one of these lectures online, I thought it's going to be a live demo. So as much as I wanted it, I actually panicked as soon as she asked, and I disappeared for a week. You can ask her about this. And I disappeared for a week because in general, I lack traditional skills of making magic and create a beautiful piece of artwork that will materialize in front of your eyes, and you will get some tips and hopefully to be able to gain some expertise. And I don't really do any of this. So I even came up with a very misleading title, Drawing a Blank, to kind of fool you to think that there's going to be some kind of drawing. But don't worry, no actual drawings have been heard during the making of this presentation. I make things in a funny way. I just fall in love with textures, and I love objects and places and people and old photographs and typography, and I research, and then at the end I kind of mix them up with mostly little dark ideas that I scribble in my sketchbooks on very early Sunday mornings while my family sleeps. I tiptoe and go to the living room and lay on the couch, grab a cup of coffee, and actually start scribbling things in there. But at the end of the day, it took me that week of disappearance between Anel's invitation to actually deciding to do something. I started figuring out that I must be good at something. I must be able to teach people something. I do hold teaching positions for the last 25 years. I go to school every week, several times. I've actually only spent like 3 or 4 years outside the academia calendar between being a student and then starting to teach. And it took that week to figure this out. It's a very scary existential exercise that I have to warn you about, to actually figure out what you teach anytime you're face to face with students. And I figured out that I am good at helping artists figure out what is next. And if someone in the audience is looking for something, they're missing an element, a little piece of a puzzle of a larger project, or something they want to pursue, maybe this presentation will actually good for something. And maybe that little piece is in this talk somehow, because the whole point is to leave with a takeaway. Otherwise, I really question the value of the time that we spent together if you guys leave empty-handed. So hopefully someone will find something here to make this worthwhile. And we especially need help when these days nothing is business as usual. If it was business as usual, we all would be at the Society of Illustrators, beautiful building, would cross that red door and go in. And I never really realized how important the society was until a little episode happened with Michel Kishka, who is very well known here and very dear to the society, but he was also my teacher at the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design. In 2001, there was a centennial celebration at the society for the 100 years. And there was a little event. He happened to be here for something else, probably for the UN. And I saw him at that event at the society, and I see him. He is taking a stack of napkins that on them says Society of Illustrators Centennial Celebration, and 1901 and 2001. And I said, Michelle, is there a lack of napkins in Israel? that you have to take a whole packet and get you some more. He said, no, I just want a stack because no one will believe me in Israel that there is such an amazing place for illustrators that has been in existence for 100 years. And then I realized there was nothing like this in Greece either. And then it kind of sunk in how special this place is for all of us, kind of bringing us together. And as I'm saying, bringing us all together and repeating that these are not business as usual times. Now we're all kind of alone in front of a piece of bright glass, and we're coming together in the best way we actually can. I'm going to paraphrase this, and I read somewhere that Zoom sessions or classes or presentations are only there to remind us how badly we need the real thing. But nevertheless, this is what we have. But it's a little bit of a problem for me because I usually draw energy to speak when I present something from my audience. Yes, I am that kind of an energy vampire. And in order to boost my energy levels for you, I actually obligated my family to watch downstairs this presentation, so I feel them around me, and I have that boost of energy just to make this a little more lively than I would do it by myself in the studio. So this is it, drawing a blank. I will try to explain myself, and we're going to go to the second slide. And these are two drawings from my school years at the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design that I have in here to prove that at one point I had a little bit of a skill. These are way pre-Bezalel Academy. This is my academic training that I did in Athens, and I trained for about a year in a very traditional way, these large presentations that we would draw for weeks, not end. And then I tried to get accepted to the fine arts school in Greece, and I did not get accepted. And then eventually I picked up after my unsuccessful attempt, and I went to Israel and tried to get accepted to the Bezalel Academy. This is what my sketchbooks looked. And when I look at them, I realized that when I went into the school, other than drawing, I had really no graphic ability. And these are my senior year sketchbooks for my thesis project, and I'm going to show them to you. But they kind of have like a way more advanced quality from zero, actually. Not that these are great, but I got everything I have from my schooling, pretty much. I'm a product of my schooling, and that's why I'm such a firm believer in it. My thesis project was a Greek mythology magazine that included lyrics from rock songs and really edgy pieces of text. It's all kind of really inspired by the movement of superlatism. I studied Malevich for a long time. This is the design of the piece. The computers just got in. They got into my school, those little Mac Classics with a handle in the back. They got in there just a year before my senior year. So I could have just missed them very, very easily. You see a major Neville Brody typographic experience. Someone handed me his first book, The Graphic Language of Neville Brody. And I've met him a couple of times, and I dearly thanked him for this. So there was a double spread of complete typography, and then there was a double spread of illustration, and this is named The Argonauts. And that was it. The project that I graduated from the school, I had to show at the MFA of Illustration at the School of Visual Arts where I was going next. They actually didn't see this. They saw work before that. So they didn't even get to see my greatest work. For some reason, I was accepted with large bodybuilding drawings and paintings, and being part of the admissions team that actually accepts people to this program now, I would have never accepted myself if I showed up as a candidate. So it's a miracle I got in there, and it literally kind of saved my life, created a very firm continuation of the framework that I received in Israel, coming to New York to study. And my dream was to study with Marshall Arisman. So it's funny, I in Greece, I dreamt studying with Michel Kishka in Israel, and he was a dear teacher and still a friend. And then I went there with having a Marshall in my mind. That could be a great song, Marshall in My Mind. But I studied with him. And this is kind of my first semester projects. They were very environmental. I was actually choking in the first semester. I spent my entire winter break. I didn't go back home, and I made this series of environmental paintings. And Marshall and my teachers found something in them as far as my thematic direction, but also a way of dealing and a way of drama and I guess a lot of smokiness. And these are acrylic paintings on top of acetate pen and ink drawing. So I developed this really backwards multimedia way of working. And this is a part of my one of the pieces for my thesis project to graduate from the program. And that piece was actually picked up by Mirko Illich at the New York Times and became my first op-ed page at the Times. And I thank Mirko until this day for giving me that chance. I actually brought my entire project. He said, we're going to publish something. I had no idea what's going to come up. And then I went next morning to get a cup of coffee and a paper to see actually which one of my pieces. And I was very excited, to say the least. And then the year continued. I started working on a new 24-piece large portfolio because I thought I'm going to have. I showed my my MFA portfolio. No one had any idea what to do with me. I was skewing way more fine arts than illustration, but I was trying to convince that illustration was what I was trying to do. So having some pieces in the New York Times started helping my case. But this is called the Catalog of Body Parts. And it was just a medical series. Actually, I see 2 out of the 3 that I chose have face masks, and that's very ominous and prophetic to a certain degree, but it had to do with animal abuse and everything. And in the middle, it's a doctor that is actually delivering a headless baby. And I remember showing this series, and 4 art directors happened to be pregnant at that time, and they almost threw me out of their window because they were so upset, and I had no idea why I didn't get an assignment. But I get my first legitimate job at Ogilvy and Mather, big advertising agency, and I'm doing actually these kind of brochures. I'm struggling with typography, and at the same time, I am doing little illustrations. These used to be 2 by 2 inches. I guess there still are. They paid $75 a pop for the New York Times, and Jarell Krause was my art director. So it came into a very kind of feverish rhythm of doing 2 and 3 pieces a week, and eventually you just get burned out because the deadline actually kills you. But I got to do a lot of those pieces, and it was a great school after school. You would call it postgraduate training. And then I get hired at Marvel Comics as an art director. I really tried, because this advertising job after 2 years was literally bringing me to tears, and I needed something very different. So I was given a great amount of opportunities at Marvel, and I got to redesign their entire their letterheads and their little cards and their little collectibles, that you call them trading cards, I guess, with very little knowledge about superheroes and their invitations to events. And I got to design and assign the illustration for their first MasterCard. And actually, this is the first credit card that I ever received. And I also had to use my connections in the bank that was editioning them, because I didn't have credit to get a credit card. So, but I had a handsome one, and it made for a good story. So design everything around the card and the little premiums you could get when you would spend a good amount of time and money with them. So here is what things eventually developed. I started doing work for Stephen Heller at the Book Review and the Wall Street Journal and The Voice, and investing in financial publications, magazine covers that became a big part of my business, science, and economics as well. And then things evolved to just, I guess, more of them. And this is something that I still do in a very, very good rhythm. And then we these are some samples of feature article illustrations, a lot of spots, just endless amount of spots. And then we get to book covers that I started doing for Paul Buckley at Penguin. It was just like a great first meeting. Showed up at his office and showed him a bunch of stuff that I did, and he gave me an assignment that right there and then that actually did not get finalized, but it was very intense and very exciting process. Actually, Emporium in the top corner is the first project we worked together. It was killed as a hardcover, but it actually was used as a paperback with Paul Buckley's brilliant art direction. And then we got into posters, or I got into posters, because I was very excited for the large format. I was trusted by the School of Visual Arts, and that's another project that paired me with Stephen Heller, and did actually 3 different rounds of posters for the subway, independent movies, and posters for very different reasons. This is a graphic novel that I did in 2014. It was published bilingually in Greece and the US. That actually brought some licensing deals, and I did not really know what they were, but I always wanted to see my artwork on skateboards and potskins and stuff like that products. And I got a series of snowboards as well with the villains of the graphic novel. Some more licensing. Here you see a piece from a fine arts, completely fine arts series called Vanity Studies that was done in 2006. So my website became almost like a stock representation of my work, and clients would go and they would choose pieces to put on products. And also from the same series, Vanity Studies, it's the band Eminence, that is the big heavy metal band in Rio. I did their cover, and they also use my artwork for the big backdrops for their concerts. And then projects started becoming larger, a little more public art oriented. This is the 2015 Photoville campaign, where we did from the oversized posters all the way to the hang tags for the staff, and the subway. Back in the subway, I guess if you don't know what Photoville is this big photo event that takes place in September. This year it will still happen. It's going to be one of the massive kind of events that will still happen. It's going to take over the several boroughs. It will start in September 17. So keep your eyes out for this event. And of course, the new campaign that I'm going to show you a little bit of. This is the media promotion that's going on, from the catalog to the gallery windows to merchandising for T-shirts, bags, and all of that stuff, all the way to bus advertising. And this is another additional big project I'm really proud of. This is actually in a very big cultural center, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center in Athens, that just opened about 3 years ago, and it's fully beautifully functional. Renzo Piano is the architect. And what happened is the foundation actually bought the first Olympics marathon run cup. Spiros Louis is the Greek runner that won it that year. And that's a long time ago. That's more than a century ago. And this is the little cup. So you see it's almost like a little very fancy kind of little chalice. I don't know what to call it. It's Game of Thrones almost beautiful cup, and I was trusted to make that long kind of mural. In there, in the bottom slice, you see the outside of that building. It's a must to visit anytime someone is in Athens. So oops. And then finally, we go for some new work, because I really want to concentrate on ongoing projects and things that are fresh to me and maybe you do not know a lot about. This is an ongoing project for the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. They have a very big philanthropy conference. I curate an exhibition that I bring from the School of Visual Arts. So this philanthropy conference, and now it's actually a general conference that has a very specific theme. I give it as an assignment to all of my students from the residency, from the summer residence, all the way to the MFA of illustration at the School of Visual Arts. Students submit beautiful posters. I curate the best fitting 24 pieces, and this is actually the installation at the lobby of the Opera House at the Stavros Niarchos Cultural Center. So this is actually the sketches and some tests from last year's project, for some reason, and you can see here on the top, I always start with something happening, something coming out of a head, because maybe that's the way my head functions. And it's kind of funny because my daughter, who's 15 now, she's 7 years old and she's in the studio and I'm working on something, and I guess I was very happy with what I did. And I said, she was drawing on the big table, and I said, Sivan, come and look at what I'm doing. And she said, at the age of 7, I know what you do. You take someone's head and you just put something on top of it. And then I realized that I need more, I'm a pony with one trick and I have to find more tricks. But nevertheless, closing the parenthesis, I very much concentrating in wanting to do a magical animal. And it was either a fish that would be flying, or it would be Rudolph with a magic nose. And then I remember of the legend of the jackalope, and someone that comes from Greece, I never knew there was such a legend, but I've seen them stuffed taxidermy on people's offices, and I always wanted one, and I never had the opportunity to make one. So I actually made one, and figure out a line that would also match and make this something that has to do with philanthropy, even though it has nothing to do with philanthropy. And it says give and do and all comes true. So by looking for out of the box approaches for these posters, because I've done a lot of philanthropy posters, I kind of went out of the box, and the bunny with the antlers kind of pretty much helped. Of course, I added some magic there, and this is part of the installation of the Opera House lobby. And that brings me to another project that is very poster related, that is very dear to my heart. And this is every day. The first year class I teach at the MFA of Illustration is based on a short story. A short story, everyone illustrates the same story. Of course, you get 20 beautiful projects that we have an exhibition where this is 2014, and I only chose this because I had great photography of the applications. You see the poster, you see the posters applied in the windows of the school, and this is the main building down on 23rd and 3rd Avenue, and this is the main gallery at the lobby. We get the graphics and we get the exhibition. But since then I've made quite a few of them. And Johnny Got His Gun was the first one where I started actually making those posters, and they started getting braver and braver. They were a little more typography based. And then actually they kind of took off, and these are the sketches from these years. And when I'm talking about these years, we had our last exhibition in January, and this was the last big kind of exhibition that I experienced in the beginning of the year. I kind of very quickly, it was about a writer that was really into a writer's block, and he would go forward in time in a time machine that someone that he knew has put together. And I'm not going to reveal the ending, but it's something where you go forward and you pay any kind of price possible to actually find out how to finish your story, because he was trying to see what he was writing in the future. So it had a lot to do with the brain. I thought of slicing the brain, leakage in the brain or something like this, but the leakage kind of took me to these chocolate drips that I have right here. And I fell in love with a typewriter that I've used in the past. And then if we kind of go forward, you see the final poster on the one side, and then the very minimal vinyl graphics, I guess, that appear in the lobby. Something that I failed to mention, I know that some of you have questions, but we will address the question at the end. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I will actually look at your comments, and I will try to answer your questions, because if I start cutting off the presentation and answering questions, I'm gonna lose my train of thought, and there is very, very little chance I'm going to be able to find the ticket to get back onto my train. And then while I was working on that project, something interesting happened. I was developing something completely different. And I hope you can see my cursor. And here I came up with something that is like a bug that has a brain on its back, and it's a little cute bug. Is that a lady beetle, whatever it's called? And I thought, oh, brain bug is such a cool idea. I want to make it anyways. I don't have anything to do with it. I don't have a use for it. And then I remember that the new Photoville campaign would be coming up, and I would need something. And then I thought I'm gonna put the brain bug aside. I'm gonna turn it into a shutter bug. That is, again, is an expression I had to learn here, and it's someone really excited to learn photography and shooting everything around them. So I thought this is gonna make such a great poster, because we haven't done a bug or anything like that in a while. But it didn't. And you see on the side with the blue and the yellow background, you got to put it in a large kind of extended background in order to really accommodate the many uses of the campaign. And that did not work, and I was asked to go back to the drafting board. And I started coming up with combinations of the camera, because for some reason, when an event is called Photoville, you need this camera to really immediately kind of communicate that. And there is so much media that goes, buses running and bus shelters and the phone booths. It's all fast communicating. So I always feel the need that a camera needs to be used, combined, usually, because that's what I do. I combine things. And I started actually making, other than these pencil little scribbles, I started making digital sketches, and then these did not work. And then I went back and I started kind of doing this liquid camera, and I call it liquid cam. And eventually that kind of worked out. And you see the sketches here, and then they lead to the side. And this is actually the main key art for Photoville. So keep your eyes out for it. It will get to you eventually through a bus or through a phone shelter. So we're also developing something about teaching. There's a large educational program that goes along with Photoville. And then I always, in the side here with the dinosaur, I did a piece for American Educator magazine. I love that all these desks together that the dinosaur is taking apart. And then I sketched it somehow with a camera, like a pile of desks. And on top of it, you have a camera. And in the bottom sketch is a camera that is really balanced on those circular desks. And then I thought that a tripod would be a little more challenging, since these little desks have frames that look very much like the tripod. And this is what on the right is what we're working with. And then we're going to something very, very different. It's a really great TV series pilot. It's called Switch, about the BDSM dominatrix industry and reality and lives and passions, and then developed. As you see here, it's like different looks, because I had to work with existing photography. And eventually we focused on this that had kind of like that sheen of vinyl and the clothing and that code, that dressing code, and developed an entire campaign, including the graphics for the website and the bus shelters and marketing materials and the posters. And these are the final posters that went out to festivals all around the world. And from the awards, the multitude of awards, you can imagine everything went really, really well with them. So here's something completely unrelated. In the beginning of the year, I'm approached by a client with this illustration of mine that I did for Los Angeles magazine 10 years ago. And they said, do you have any more of these? We would like to make wine labels with them. And eventually I figured out that I have to design the wine labels, and I have to also use existing pieces of art because the budget is such. And so I had to kind of repurpose my pieces. And then the sketches are mostly for the design, and because they had to be formatted in a really cool way to make it really interesting for myself as well, and create a really nice framework for the images. And these were the sketches for the pieces. And eventually they were attracted to the bottom right piece. It was called the Culture Collection. So there was a cultural aspect to them. And I used an illustration that I created just a little while ago, 2 years ago, for CNET magazine. And And then I actually created a cultural version of this. And because it was really helpful to have a very large image and then isolating little pieces from it to create individual labels. As long as every label had a thematic center, it would work, and it was good enough for 12 of them. So that is still into process. And then this is a project that has been a personal project, and developing a new gallery series, and it's called Corporata, and it focuses on the medical industry and especially the cosmetic industry. So it uses that really beautiful glitzy packaging that you see in commercials, and then actually turning them on their head and showing a lot of the dark secret of these industries. And eventually one of them was picked, even though they're still in development, and you're looking at the one with the frog, that soap bottle with a frog in it, and I photographed the frog at the Natural History Museum here in New York. But the frog and this really kind of troubling aura that the piece had, it was not really good for a lifestyle magazine. So I made some difference with focusing on that made up eye and the buildings that eventually end up in the side, and the taxi photograph in the bottom. So it created a little more of an urban New York City kind of environment. And then we go into an editorial piece. The editorial piece is for Entrepreneur Magazine. It was about philanthropy, a subject that I know a lot about, having actually money-making spin-offs to them, and actually feeding the money back to the philanthropic focus that they had. On the left, you see the sketch that it was very, very minimal, but we need something a little more literal and something that actually relates to money directly. So we came up with this calculating machine. We kept the little airplane, but it became something very, very different. But I really, really loved the sketch, and now developing into a poster for actually the philanthropy posters from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation conferences. We're taking the best maybe 20 pieces that are the contributions of the SVA MFA of Illustration program, and we'll actually have an exhibition at the Greek consulate in New York in the beginning of the year. So look out for some way, shape, or form that poster that pretty much shows that philanthropy just takes off. You do something, and then you actually hit a switch, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. And then we get to the sketches for a magazine that is called Hadara Magazine. It means culture, and it's one of the magazines it's a cultural magazine for one of the Gulf Emirates, I guess. And it's a women's book club. It's kind of like a really inspiring story about a club really becoming the framework for females there to actually write more and read more, and actually do something with their writing and bond with each other. So it's a really beautiful idea. And I've never worked with Arabic calligraphy. And you see all of these sketches. Of course, it was a dress code that I never had to deal with, and I had to learn a lot of things about it. It was like 2 illustrations, and this is the final that exaggerates the writing aspect, but it combines really traditional and advanced methods of writing, from typewriters to laptops, having a lot of images and beautiful textures that I'm really glad I got to work with. And then here is a project in the summer for a magazine called Le Nouveau Magasin Littéraire, and all of my French is coming to mind. And you see, I was really, really interested in this kind of the director's chair turning into a spider, because it was about Netflix actually really sucking in at all of these books and turning them into movies. And I'm saying sucking in because I've used at the end we had to use something, and you'll see what the connection is. But when I started actually executing that spider, it was just not coming together the way I thought and romanticized it in my mind. And then we got, you know, Netflix with the X on the book. That was actually a clever, I thought, solution. And then we had this big head of this camera head that is reading a book, and it's piled up. But they were way too, you know, nervous to use the Netflix N, and they were too nervous to use a giant head with machinery on it. So we just pan back, and this is what the spread looks like in the sketch that I received, because under Netflix it says subtitles, so obviously that's not the final double spread. And here is a vacuum cleaner actually sucking all the books in. So we went. I got to keep the machine head, the camera head, but I put in something really, and then we of course erased the N from the projector. But I stayed with the wanting to do something with a big camera head, and then a Fellini exhibition that hasn't started yet. I was invited to contribute to it. I think there was like 100 artists, poster artists from all around the world. I was asked to contribute to it, and then I started sketching. I said, oh my God, this is the perfect opportunity to reuse my camera head exactly the way I want it. I fell in love with this big F dimensional letter, and the colors were kind of almost of the Italian flag. Of course, I thought of using this iconic image of Fellini. And to be honest with you, I knew very little. I knew about the legend of Fellini, but I don't think I've ever finished watching an entire Fellini movie. I didn't even know you spell Fellini with 2 L's. But I had a crash course, and YouTube comes into your help. You see here, I also, many years ago, based on my first book, I created this cameraman running, and then that became the logo of a independent movie company. And then right next to it, I'm copying myself with a very kind of terrible facsimile of it, but I really felt like having to draw it to get it out of my head. And then eventually I start combining, and this is not Fellini. I actually modified my character after studying Fellini's characteristics to kind of almost look like him. And here at the bottom is his signature, and it kind of looks Italian. And the one on the left looked way too organized for Fellini, and then it started kind of coming apart, and eventually this is the final poster, including the typography, kind of really going, turning into something surreal in the back of his head. So that's a wish granted. Big-headed machine heads rule. And then we have an article for Security Management magazine for the cover, explaining how actually now that everyone works from home, the biggest danger for companies is actually from inside someone's home. People that work from home are becoming a big danger for companies that don't have their act together. And you see people are looking at themselves, the homes, the heads, combining the people working with laptops, but there's almost like a big brother configuration that watches people that are working home. And then these are the digital sketches. It was a lot of fun. Of course, as soon as someone says security, I go to knights and armor and shields and helmets. But this was a danger from within, was not a danger from the outside, the way it appears here, but it was nevertheless fun to do it. And you see all of the different sketches. And eventually this is what we used for the cover and for the inside spread. Now this is in towards the end of the winter started. I was invited by Stephen Heller and Print Magazine to do a series of illustrations, 5 of them, called the 5 Cyber Freedoms. And Stephen Heller came up with 5 cyber freedoms vis-a-vis the 4 freedoms that we traditionally know from World War II. And everything was about this invasion of our cyber space, not for a good reason. So you see an array of really scary stuff here. And I had a great time working with this series, and you will see it. This pretty much, and the pieces had typography on them. So I had that kind of split to show danger. And then you have this multiple messaging and this typewriter from a profile that is actually leaking about freedom from misinformation. And then we have the other three. And in the bottom, you see some sketches that were not eventually chosen. And I chose the top pieces. And now kind of reworking all of the 5 of them to become posters. And I changed the actual half and half color. And I wonder, why didn't I do this for the actual illustrations? But I hope it works, along with the typography for the series of posters. Then we go to a very recent article about the decision of large companies trying to invest in more green ways because they found that it's more profitable. So this is for the Milken Institute Review, a beautiful, beautiful publication by the Milken Institute in design and production. I haven't seen actual quality printing like this in a long, long time. And then I started sketching. I figured out that I need those chart ribbons and arrows, and they would be very valuable because it was 4 illustrations, and I needed something to actually tie them together. And here we have more sketches. I did a lot of sketches because I knew very well I wanted to use chimneys, and this is a chimney in the center of the photographs that I photographed in Greece a long, long time ago. I knew I want to use smoke from the bottom because pollution, and it's something against pollution. And then this is a photograph of my plug downstairs. Our plugs blew up a little while ago. That was the most expensive electric work I had, and I took a picture immediately because it was very tempting. The problem with these plugs is like whatever, no matter what you do and I mean, they're on fire here pretty much and burned. They always look like a sad face. And I didn't want to have that. I thought it was fairly cheesy. So I had to use more European plugs that don't seem that sad for some reason. And then use either metaphors like this ink brush stroke as smoke, and then that big chimney and the different ways of energy and all of this. And then this is the opening spread that combines electric and traditional energy. And then these are the other 3 pieces. The way they use it, I thought it was actually pretty cool to use these charts as smoke coming out of them. But nevertheless, it was like a beautiful project. I really enjoyed mentally as well. And this is a piece for Entrepreneur Magazine. On your right, you will see a sketch for something different that didn't work. But keeping this in mind, it was about earn and learn how companies more and more are hiring interns that they pay. And this is where people in a very kind of mentorial European old-fashioned way, where you actually have someone to help you, and then they eventually become a colleague. And it was, it was like a school desk that had an engine, or a graduation hat that had an engine. And I look at this older illustration sketch, I'm like, oh my God, it's a desk and it has an engine. And eventually it came out to be this. It was like a graduation hat that had an engine, but it was also a desk. We did lose the head in the bubble, but it will come back at some point. Everything makes a circle in my mind. And then this is a more recent project for Entrepreneur Magazine. That's what's out right now. And it's about copycats that actually do take your idea, and then the original company is using the internet and social media to actually fight back. Is this a good idea or not? As soon as, to attack, of course, I have arrows in my mind. And I thought, of course, a cell phone all pierced by arrows was very, very attractive to me. But I didn't think that it worked, because no one was shooting at the social media. Social media was used to shoot things out. So I created this kind of beautiful and liquidy configuration, and it was colorful and very abstract to a certain degree. And you see here all the copies, and it's attacking the copies. And I was very, very happy with myself, but I was kind of brought to reality where we needed something a little more literal and substantial. And eventually I got to do my arrows just flying out and they had to be not really lethal arrows. So this is where the suction arrow is created. and or maybe we have them in cartoons, I guess, and they're coming out of the arrow, attacking these copycats that is just like the shadow of the copycat. And these are the two cats that actually auditioned, and the top one actually won for the cat position in here. And then we have another fairly recent illustration, and it's about the New Jersey medical establishment really racing to create what we need for COVID-19. And of course, I created the glove that holds the solution, and it's a mixture of a microscope, but also has an engine to just show the race that maybe was just a little too much. And then we went in with multiplicity to show the race, and with something very simple. And I guess that kind of did it. And that's the spread right on the left. And this is something that is out right now. It's kind of like a 3 years in the making kind of cover. There is brand new cutting edge technology that is analyzing the 20,000 little pieces. And you can see that little piece of typography here from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is like ancient Hebrew writing that they could not put together because they didn't know how. It was after all, it was 20,000 different little scraps. And these are the Qumran caves in Israel, where they were found, like kind of rolled up and they're all dried animal skins. And eventually DNA technology was developed, and they were able to identify exactly which animal every piece came from. And they were able, assuming that if you came from the same animal, you were written at the same time. So they started actually having a tool to really organize them. So this was big news. It's very, very academic. And then we have all these ways that I try to manipulate those original high resolution pieces of ancient writing. And eventually they became the cover for Cell magazine. Then we go to a project that I did a month and a half ago for BBC Top Gear magazine. Fisker is a brilliant car designer that has worked with Tesla, and now he's launching actually his own car. I did this yellow splashy piece. It was a Pirelli assignment, and Fisker is in the middle. And then I thought this spiral graphic combination would be great, but it would be a little too minimal, I guess. So I had to come up with things that were way more complex, and pretty much the central composition is maybe very similar, but the backgrounds are different. And then we kind of ended up with this. We ended up with blue sky. And this is an assignment that is very dear. It's this piece is still on the newsstands. It's called Quantum Steampunk. Please don't ask me to explain this. I only knew that we have engines that are quantum physics inspired, but they're using a lot of that good old steampunk aesthetic or philosophy or concept. So I knew immediately we need to do some kind of an engine. And this is actually a steampunk gun that is the letter H just tilted from a steampunk alphabet that I will show you later. These are the sketches. So you see different kinds of engines that they could choose from, and that was eventually the piece that ended up in the magazine. I really like the way it looks. It opens up and it kind of explodes and smokes in your face. But if I am to say anything, Michael Mrak from the magazine did do some brilliant casting, because I do steampunk themed work, and these are my contributions to biking exhibitions in Greece for charity. I've done a series, my bestiary series has been exhibited, and it's all very much steampunk based. And I do a series of books for Tlon, for Tor. Tlon is something very different. I knew what it was. I had to study up on it. I really loved the genre, And this is pretty much the book that is in the bookstores right now, the Reverend Express. These were the two sketches, and the sketches are fairly advanced, a lot of metal in there. And this is actually what ended up being the book cover. And these are the sketches for the one that we just finished right now. It's going to be published in the end of fall this year. You see there's a very kind of pathetic little scribble of the profile of Queen Victoria. We were provided with a comic book where Victoria is in her chair and she's breathing through devices. And these actually were chosen. We didn't go for a profile. We went for something that was a little closer to that comic book depiction. But eventually the piece on the right is what is going to be used. We lost the goggles because they were not very Queen-like, but we gained that huge tube that is coming out of the Queen's chest so she can breathe. So look out for it. I'm looking forward to them as well. And just a couple of words about Steampunk Alphabet that I finished in 2019, the product of a good amount of research. I tried to make them just one individual object per letter. And you see here, this is a plague doctor's mask. And in presentations, I would make a joke and I would say, if, and here's the plague doctor for the letter P, if this guy comes into town, you know you're in trouble, and now we're in trouble and he's nowhere on site. But they could not really do anything. They were hoax doctors. But nevertheless, the product of some research. On your left, you see Edison's electric pen that eventually failed as a pen, but it became the first tattoo machine. And then I recreated it as the numeral 9 on the right. Then inspired by an old cover for the Village Voice, all the way to something else for Tor, for 7 Sigma. It became the letter Q, changed in several ways. And then inspired by a piece that I did a while ago for the Wall Street Journal with a train, it created a little Y. And this is the entire alphabet that you see. And several letters have different versions. And then there was a really great exhibition at the Type Directors Club in the end of winter of 18 till the beginning of 19. And this is the poster on the left. It was called Phenotypes. And then while I was taking that exhibition down, I was given an assignment to create 10 book covers for a dystopian series for the book publishing company called Oxy. And it's art directed by a great type designer. And Yannis Karlopoulos did create a special typeface for them. And I did the Greek version of the Bird Box. And you see the sketches that I showed them. Plague Doctor comes back. And then eventually what they chose, every book came out with 2 different covers. And these both use pieces of Steampunkfabet. These are for Keep Stanley's 2312. And these are the 2 covers. And it was great to see them last year in the bookstores at the end of the summer, but I saw just a couple of them, and it's going to be a 10-piece series. Naomi's Room, and these are the covers. And finally, the Power, and pay a little bit of attention to the centerpiece. That was a sketch that was not chosen for the covers, but eventually it became a COVID piece. And before I put the poster out, I thought it was like way too sensitive for something so harsh, so I kind of held it back. And then I did some more sketches about how to strengthen it, and then came up with this configuration. But I'm holding it, and it's going to be the base for something that I will exhibit. But I also curate an exhibition at the Jewish Museum in Athens in the middle of next year about Greece existence, Jewish existence in Greece from antiquity until kind of fairly recently, archaeologically speaking. So I'm going to be using this. And you see all the Post-its here. So that proves that I actually do some legitimate work. And then to react to COVID, I started, rehashing. Look, it's the plague doctor again with a background with images that came from the U.S. Library of Congress, and almost making pseudo posters without really knowing what I'm doing. But I wanted to create a series of pieces, and I'm going to hold that thought. And here is. I wanted to make like a 2020 edition of the Plague Doctor, and it's all based on this little vacuum cleaner, and that's it. And this is still in progress, and still kind of no idea of what to do with this, but I had to get it out there. But to go back to my original point about trying to do something cohesive about what we're going through became very, very important, because I caught myself reacting to the news, creating a piece for everything that is going outside, inequality and violence and death. And then you end up just reacting when I wanted for something to come from like deeply on the inside. And of course, a lot of people started working on journals about the pandemic, and I immediately hated it. And then eventually just went back to it and saw what is so important about this. But still, I started making images like these, and that was an image I wanted to make for a long time. I photographed that cool plug in Athens many years ago. But then there was not something pandemic specific to these characters. I like them. I still love you, but there's nothing to do with you right now. And then I put this, it's a pawn. It's like a bat or fly, because butterflies, of course, became very popular, and combined, and then that gave me that. Okay, so this started seeming to be a little more legitimate, and a little more of something that is related to what the absurdity of what we're going through. And the most difficult part of starting a series was because I wanted this to be a larger series. I usually do 24 pieces, but the most difficult part, of course, it's the beginning. You're finished a series, and then the nightmare of what I'm going to do next comes in, and like really makes everything so much harder. But there is something that happens while you're testing, and this is another piece that I did to kind of see where the series would go, and then I finally I'm discarding that piece, because as much as it was to kind of sketch this mutant fish because of the pandemic, I guess the water is polluted, and we start having the alternate bat and the fish in the water. It seemed like so paranoid and funny that it would not be good for what I wanted to actually express, because I wanted something deeper. So eventually I figured it out, and this is to kind of close a circle with what I spoke about in the beginning, about hopefully this presentation being something that someone can use a little piece of it to kind of conclude or finalize the plans for their a project that they're working on. 13 years ago, I started a program, and I still run a little program called the School of Visual Arts Summer Illustration Residency. And it's a little program because I'm little, so they didn't want to give me anything bad, but big. But it's a program that is very close to my heart, and I really have the opportunity to really collaborate and have some brilliant people teach for the program, to the benefit of the residents, but also invite great people to come in and lecture for us. And a few weeks ago, we had Andrea Tsurumi in, and she described the process of creating a book. She makes beautiful children's books, and she kind of threw such a great organized light on that process that I took something from it, and it eventually gave me my last piece that I was missing to actually organize my thoughts. And I'm very lucky that I had Andrea as a student many years ago, and as a teacher actually a few weeks ago. So eventually I started photographing these funny ideas first. When you blow up a glove, it becomes a balloon. But then when you put it in a context, it becomes something not completely sad, but it becomes something a little more dramatic. So it's this, place where these things are happening, and these people are all affected by the pandemic because they had to learn to live with it. And it's something that actually shows. And then that's the other kind of thing. I photographed the glove on a doll head in the studio, and I actually had to do several reiteration of it until it kind of worked in a dramatic way. And it's kind of funny, peculiar, and sad at the same time. But I put a lot of effort in this thing actually being what I want it to be. And then here's the frog again, and experimenting in these really old. I did the sketch. I mean, that's what I think a frog looks like in pencil. And then I put it in that beaker, and that my wife is kind enough to bring home from the lab. And then I took a lab from 100 years ago and kind of grafted and changed and tinted and manipulated in order to bring this into a dramatic testing, trying to figure out what we need. And then a large element of the inequality, where the haves and have-nots are experiencing this pandemic. And here is where this bubble kind of helmet comes back in. This is the sketch. I know I kind of want a really big, elaborate dress. And here, actually, my character has a face shield, but I thought that the bubble would be really much better and very handsome and posed and beautifully dressed to really show how people are dealing with what we're going through. And then that is a sketch that I did last week, and it's actually this reality. And I hate to leave you with this as the last slide, but I will, because we're not out of the woods. But I don't want to leave without really thanking the society for trusting me with the valuable time, and you trusting me with your valuable time. But I want to also thank my teachers through the years and through continents, my family that puts up with me, and a guy that makes pictures such as these. And you know where to find me, on Sunday early mornings, scribbling in my sketchbook. Thank you very much. That's also a piece from the new series. It's great being with you. I will quickly stop sharing, and I will go to see what's going on with questions. And I have Victor. Where do you source your images for the photo collages? Very, very, very good question. I shoot a lot. I shoot more and more with my cell phone, and then I also use stock when I'm not able to shoot things myself. I'm also a terrible photographer, so whenever I want something really beautiful, I do go and buy it. I use photography that is vintage, so it's really out of copyright, and I do a lot of research. I more and more like doing photo research, and these are the places where I find my photography. I know that. How could you recommend finding new clients and opportunities during this time? This is a great and very crucial question. And my answer is this. Number one, there are two very big differences to people that did have clients originally and people that did not have clients or are just kind of starting out. And the way this works is very tricky for both categories. But for one of the demographic, the ones that did have actual assignments, because assignments are out there, they're great uses of our skills. Maybe it's in more animation, so motion comes into play. and maybe it's in ideas, in brand new ideas that you actually pitch instead of wait for people to approach you for them. But for both having published portfolio pieces and not having portfolio pieces, the key is to keep on with production. If we don't keep producing things that we're really, really feel are important to us, we are sunk. So even though there's a good amount of assignments still coming through, I was doing sketches for a couple of new assignments before stopping to do this with you. I have this very serious personal project that I'm working on, and it's very sad that it took a pandemic to get me going, because I told you before, starting is very, very difficult, and I to be honest with you, I didn't think I have it in me to start another long series, because they take a long time to produce. But I've been producing images for my new personal project nonstop for the last 6 weeks. And I still do it. And yes, I'm still sketching on Sundays or Saturdays. I have a new burst of ideas. I'm attracted to things from the outside. And I also come up with ideas from scratch and go out and find the imagery to mix and match and make them happen. But the point is, you create new work you're passionate about, and you keep your visibility online, because even if you wanted to mail something today, so this pandemic really resolved the debate of, do I send postcards or do I become religious about uploading things, posting things on Instagram? And the answer is always both. But right now, online is all we have, and social media and these very specific illustration platforms are all we have. We also have agents that are running for us to try and make miracles and get us assignments. But either way, the key is you produce work. If you produce work, you have what to show. If you show things you love, you will receive assignments you will love resolving. And I tell students and residents, illustrators, there is a very strange element about the profession of illustration. We follow exactly Einstein's rule, or actually definition of madness, of people that are trying the same thing again and again, expecting different results. And if it doesn't, we put it out in the world, it doesn't work, we make more. We put it on the world, it doesn't work, we make more, we get something, we built on it, we put out more, we get more out of it. New work attracts eyeballs, and eyeballs are connected to heads and bodies that control assignments. So you work your personal connections, you show people you care, you check up on them, because our clients are also not going through the easiest of times. And you make sure you connect with them in old-fashioned ways, and you connect with them with social media. And that's about it. If you're just starting, and that becomes a question for usually students or beginning illustrators, do people always are looking for fresh talent? Always fresh talent. We produce really gifted artists that go out and really carve a piece of the industry for themselves and have great results. And it's great to watch them grow, and we hate them and we're jealous of them because they're doing so well. But at the end of the day, we are inspired, and then we move and we do more things. So for beginners, do the same. You have to find a way to be motivated, find a framework. I'm not saying that only classes and continuing education and residencies are the way to go, but it is a way to go. I tell my residents, you guys have done a major step forward to help your career. You have made a commitment, a financial commitment that will translate itself into a business and a career investment. And that's what you do. But if you cannot do this, if you don't want to do that, there is a lot of knowledge around. There are a lot of ways to connect with fellow illustrators. And even if you find illustrators that are not getting anything published, but you have really truthful, honest discussions with them, you know what? We need company. The same misery needs company. I have, I get with people and we used to cry over cups of coffee, and then your coffee is way too salty. And then you just get it out of your system. You get the poison out, as they say, and then you go home and you're inspired to make a new great piece that you put up, and then someone sees it and they get attracted and you get an assignment after that. So that's what I would do. And out of everything right now, social media is it appears to be free. It's not free. It takes a lot of our time. If it's done correctly, it takes a lot of our time. So time is the most expensive thing we have. It's not free, but it's very cheap to actually attract people. And you only attract people if you show them new work. So find a way to make this happen. Take a great book and make a series of illustration. Go to the New York Times and look at their editorial pieces. If every week you choose one subject matter that you like, one article, and you make one illustration, if you don't make one piece of art, don't come to me and tell me you're trying to have a career in illustration. If you make one piece every week, within 6 months, you will have almost 40 new pieces of artwork to show, and that's a full portfolio. So making and showing is really the ticket. Next question is, do you ever use photos you've taken just on your iPhone? Is there a concern for the quality of the photos you use, or do you embrace things like noise, pixelation, and different resolutions? The answer is yes to all of them. Static and resolution and pixelation. Of course, we try to shoot in as you can always go. If you shoot something high resolution, you can go down in the resolution. You can, if you shoot something low resolution, you can never go up. So especially because I'm someone that does not know most of my photography, I have no idea where it's going to end up. I will shoot the highest possible resolution I can. I will shoot several times. If it's a place where I can wait for better light, I take some quick shots and then come back the next day. I will buy an object and then actually set it up and try to photograph it. I'm not saying I'm good, but I use all of this. I love textures as filters. I don't use a lot of filters, but I use a lot of layers. And yes, I do use several effects that I try and I learn in very old-fashioned ways and make this happen. So yes to all of your questions. They're all really good ideas. If we thank you so much for the Extra Door presentation. Thank you. I'm glad the frog made his comeback. Who would you name as your inspiration, influence on your artistic expression? That's a tough question. I do love medieval paintings because of the beauty, the breathless beauty of the craft. Painting, even though I don't paint, traditional painting is a great source of inspiration for me. I remember, renting an Airbnb, and they had a book of 100 great artists, and I spend every moment paging through them and learning facts and really marveling at that collection of that book. I completely had my head around that book, and I'm going to get it as soon as I can buy a book that is not online, because I want to support my local bookstores. So that kind of painting is very inspirational. Francis Bacon is a great inspiration to my general kind of direction. I love those, let's be honest, meaty paintings, and by his life story and his determination and by his talent and the energy. I mean, if you ever looked at paintings that Francis Bacon did, even over 80 years old. You would never think that that's an 80-year-old person making these paintings. So, and then I'm very much influenced by Marshall Arisman. Marshall Arisman and Michelle Kishka are teachers of mine, and they're mentors of mine, and Marshall is my boss, and it's great. So these are my sources. And then I get very much inspired by my students. My students, week in and week out, they create beautiful pieces of artwork. And as I said again in the SVA summer illustration residency, I get to invite great people that I always admired. And as soon as you throw that business card down, people really want to come and share with our residents and our students, and I get to benefit greatly from it. So that makes it very powerful, and it has a great impact in my work, because I do want to I want to fight the relevancy fight and remain someone that actually creates work that matters. And I'm a difficult customer. I want it to matter for me, and I want it to matter for other people. So I want to make important things, and I'm still figuring out plenty of pieces. Is not easy actually to figure this one out. So it's very tricky. Again, I will go back to a previous question, but it's a very important one to find anything that would make you actually start a new series of images. And I see my struggle with my new personal series compared to my older bestiary series, because I finished several years ago, and it's been exhibited and still will be exhibited very soon as well in my New York gallery. But trying to find what the differences are. What am I doing that is advancing my personal growth? And I don't know. Look, I'm a workaholic. I figure things out through work, and I'm really lucky to be married to someone that really gets really enthusiastic about the things I make, even though she doesn't agree with all of them. And both of my kids are really artistic and brilliant in ways that I will never be. So when you're surrounded with mentors, friends, and family, you can't go wrong. So if there's another piece of advice, is surround yourselves with such people. Surround yourselves with industry friends, people to go to for advice and real words of criticism, because everyone can say a good word and then you go back to the weather. But it's difficult for someone to say, this is not really working yet. And this is what I found year after year. When I graduated from the MFA at the School of Visual Arts, I would go back to Marshall Arisman to show him my new series of 24 pieces. And he was always kind and gracious, but I could see it in his face. I could see what he liked and what he didn't like. And he didn't really have to speak. I only had to page my portfolio, and his face would change. And you gotta find these kinds of mentors. And it's such a great privilege to be surrounded. And the School of Visual Arts has done such a great job at surrounding us to just being able to run into people like Stephen Heller, whom I've worked and I still collaborate, and he's a mentor, and people like Marshall and Louis Feely, and get some of that never-ending energy, along with this great hope that someone doesn't, but that there are different ways of aging. There's a way that you can go to your studio and do the things you love until the end, until you're taking out of there in a pine box, as they say, and that would be truly a great way to go. And I think with those words and great ways to go and good advice, I thank you again for your time. I will say good night and goodbye. Be productive. Thank you so much. Goodbye.